Salute, fellas. Prince Sports here, and I want to talk to you guys about NBA players and greatness, and when we talk about GOATs. Now, normally when we talk about who's the best basketball player of all time, it's usually a Michael Jordan. Then you got some Kobe's in there, you got some LeBrons in there. People tend to talk about those three guys the most, but what about the other guys? What about Magic, Kareem, Tim Duncan? Tim Duncan is probably, for me, the most underrated basketball player of all time, man. When you look at a guy, not only did he beat LeBron James more times, he got a bunch of individual accolades. There's no questioning about it, as if he's the greatest at his position, the best power forward of all time. But he's seriously underrated and underlooked. And it's because I think the entertainment factor. I think you don't like Tim Duncan or you don't talk about the guy is because he's essentially, quote unquote, boring. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's one of the reasons why people don't talk about Tim Duncan as much. But the actual reality of it is, he got just as good of a resume as anybody. All right? You could make an argument that he's one of the best players of his generation, along with the Kobe's, the Shaqs, and it was those three guys that was defining that early 2000 era. And it's kind of weird that all for the simple fact that you think that he's boring, that he don't get that much recognition. Guys like LeBron James, he attracts a lot of headlines and stories, but when you look at his resume, out of all those three guys I just mentioned, his on is the most suspect, and his on got the most holes in it. Okay, he has the more holes in his resume than a lot of superstars. Even if you put him in your top 5, he still has the most holes in there. To me, I think if you're going to be in the top 5, you got to have more finals wins than losses. That's one thing. And you got to have certain moments, because when we talk about great basketball players, you got to somewhat nitpick at some things that they do. And you got to compare it to another player and say, hey, this was more impressive or equally just as impressive. But when you look at a guy like Tim Duncan, man, he checks a lot of things on the board. But people don't talk about it. We don't talk about Kareem. We don't talk about Magic. We don't talk about nearly of these guys enough. It's always consistently, the Mikes. Michael Jordan has an untouchable resume for a resume that checks just about everything. So calling him a GOAT is very valid. But, you got Kobe who gets talked about a lot. And he was fortunate enough. I wouldn't say fortunate enough, but he does have the label as being the sidekick, and that's kind of rare, because usually when you are a top 5 player in the league, nobody want to look at you as a sidekick. You got to be like the man or the number one guy to why you won championships for most of that part. And I think one of the reasons why Magic gets penalized is because he shared the spotlight with Kareem a little bit, and he had he wasn't clear the number one guy all the time on that Lakers team. And that gets held against his legacy, because you got to be perceived as that number one guy. Now LeBron James does have that to his advantage to a certain extent, but he does have the Bill Russell thing staining against his career, which is playing with too much talent. The more talent you play with, especially when you get it in the way LeBron has got it, you do get penalized for that. Bill Russell got penalized for it. Magic got penalized for it. So only right that LeBron James gets penalized for it. But Tim Duncan, he got drafted to the San Antonio Spurs. Manu Ginobili and Tony Parker was perceived as flops, so to speak. Nobody thought of those guys as being going to be great players. They developed into great players. Okay? So Tim Duncan has a lot riding for him, close to Michael Jordan. He stayed with one franchise, and he stuck it out with that team, for bad or worse. For good or bad, excuse me. And he stuck it out. And by the grace of God and the grace of hard work and dedication on Tony Parker's part, Manu Ginobili's part, guys that were presumed to be flops, they went off to becoming a great basketball team, anchored by the great Tim Duncan. and some good coaching from Greg Pop. But Tim Duncan was the vocal point to why those teams won championships. And he's the greatest power forward of all time that constantly gets overlooked. And I think we got to come out of that way of thinking and give this man his props. There's no reason why Tim Duncan shouldn't even be rated above LeBron James. How is LeBron James ranked above Tim Duncan when Tim Duncan beat LeBron James more times and would have beat him 3 times if it wasn't for a shot for Ray Allen? That's how close it was. Came back the next year and mopped him. Spacked him around. Man, come on, man. We got to give Tim Duncan his props. Best power forward of all time. And it's about damn time that we give this man some respect. Prince Sports out. Peace.